Cyber attacks, CMEs, EMPs, and now even software updates. How can we prepare against all of these threats? This is what I'm talking about today. Hi, this is Everyday Prepper. Welcome to the channel. As preppers or individuals just starting out with some kind of preparedness, we often hear about cyber attacks. We hear about CMEs, coronal mass ejections, EMPs, electromagnetic pulse devices, taking out the grid and other infrastructure, and it's hard to know which one to prepare for. Before I get into that, I want to cover some recent events that have prompted this video, and then I want to discuss some practical steps as to how to be prepared for all of these scenarios. So first up, we have the cyber attack, or confirmed cyber attack, on a company called Change Healthcare in the US. So it's owned by another company, I think, but this caused many pharmacies across the US to go completely offline. They had to shut down their systems to prevent any further damage, and it resulted in people not being able to get their prescriptions, and more worryingly, it also prevented a lot of military personnel, even worldwide, through their TRICARE system, which is part of the same group apparently, to not be able to get their prescriptions or certain medications. So that's the first issue that we had. I'm probably a bit late in the game here, but that happened a few days ago, and that was a confirmed cyber attack. Second major incident, again in the US, was the AT&T outage, the cell phone outage, which was pretty widespread, and apparently about 70,000 reports of people not being able to get a signal or just only SOS signals on their phones. I think AT&T also provides some kind of internet infrastructure as well, and obviously that went down for some people. I know there was also reports of other networks going down, but I think that was when people with those other networks were trying to contact someone using an AT&T network, so it was limited to just AT&T. The initial thoughts were, this was a cyber attack as well, but apparently AT&T have come out and said that this is due to a software update. Now, that kind of outage is a bit worrying, really, and pretty shoddy for a big company like that that's been around for a long time to not be a victim of an attack, but just literally a software update. So I know there are theories that that's not what happened. I know there's a lot of big solar activity at the moment, and there's talk about the a CME affecting that, and them just reporting that it was a software update. I don't know, but what I do know, it was back up and running fairly quickly, within a day. So although I'm sure it had a major impact on those individuals during that particular time, it didn't cause other major issues that I'm going to go on to in a bit. Thirdly, we had some radio signals in the HF spectrum, the high frequency spectrum, were affected by some solar flare activity, or I don't think it was a CME, I think it was just solar flare activity, and that is the HF spectrum of radio is particularly vulnerable to that because it uses the ionosphere to propagate the signals, so it can be affected by magnetic interference up in the upper atmosphere. So it's my understanding that normal UHF and VHF signals weren't affected. So if you had like a ham radio as a backup or walkie-talkies as a backup, you wouldn't be affected by that. So what I wanted to touch on really is how this might impact us in the UK and what we can do to prepare against it. Now, as far as AT&T going down, if a major network went down, and I rely on my mobile for work, for delivery driving, and I use various apps. And if the network went down, then I might be able to get a Wi-Fi signal, might be able to use that by staying close to home to get jobs and that kind of thing. But apart from that, generally, if it went on for a long period of time, I really would struggle. I'd probably have to start negotiating with individual venues that I deliver to and from, and try and get some sort of radio backup to communicate between them. But as far as preparing for a cyber attack or a CME or an EMP, you're not going to be able to affect it. You're not going to be able to prevent this from happening. A cyber attack may be on your own PC or your own computer or a mobile phone at home. You have the up-to-date virus controls and make sure your software's updated properly, as I'm sure some people did with AT&T. And so you're not necessarily going to be able to prevent it, but there's a point to what I'm saying here. It doesn't really matter what the cause of the event was. That's got nothing to do with it. It's about the event and what kind of impact this event would have on you. Again, how do we prepare for coronal mass ejection from the sun? Well, be aware of it. I'm a keen astronomer, so I'm often very interested in what's happening on in our solar system and beyond. But I can't do anything about it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. There's really not a lot we can do about it. Same with cyber attacks on infrastructure. Not a lot I can do about that. I can't affect how my local water company deals with cyber attacks or prevents them. So as an individual, what we've got to do is make sure that we're prepared for the fallout afterwards. So if we had a major mobile phone outage, I'm lucky I've got a phone with dual SIM. I don't know if that's kind of a thing for most mobiles nowadays. Mine's quite an old phone, and you can put another SIM card in where the SD card goes. So I quite often go into locations, because I'm out in the sticks really, and I quite often lose signal on one network, and I'll just switch a SIM over and I'll get a signal on the other network, and it's okay. But if we had a cell tower went down, or which we have done a few years ago, where network signals were very, very patchy in quite a large area and for quite a long time. So, if that was to happen, that would majorly affect my work. So, which is why we always have a backup of some cash in the house. We also have various accounts with some extra money in, not a great deal because of, cost of living going up and everything else. It's not like we're, loaded and we can stuff loads of savings away, but I do have a little bit, just enough to buffer maybe a week or so. Probably need a lot more than that, maybe 2-3 months. 3 months, I think, probably is a minimum, which we used to have, but we have depleted that since our mortgage has gone up so much. So, it worked for a time, but now we've got to try and build it up again. So my point is this, and I wanted to make this sort of brief as possible really. If you're prepping for the basics, you're putting some water aside. You're putting, think about your actual needs to live. Your water, your food, your comms, your meds, and the skills to use them. Comms like walkie-talkies, like these things. These will go for about a mile line of sight, maybe a little bit more, depending on the conditions. I've tried these between here and our local shops, which is about half a mile away, and they work okay. So it'd be good to keep up with. Keep in touch with your family if there was a network outage. But long term surely is what we're prepping for. Day-to-day stuff. If networks went down for a day, or you ended up without power for a day, we could deal with that. Generally, you have, most people have torches or tea lights around the house. But I've always considered prepping to be prepping for a long-term event. So as I said, having the basics, like if you're on prescription medication, try and get some of that spare in your med kit. This was highlighted recently with the cyber attack on the healthcare system in the States. People not being able to get prescriptions. Well, imagine if that was, I think it was only about a day or so, if that it happened, maybe a few hours. But imagine if that was to happen for a few weeks, or even a month, or a couple of weeks. You rely on that medication. So from a UK perspective, we've got an ageing population. There's probably quite a lot of people who are dependent on certain prescription medication as well. So something like the healthcare system going down and not being able to issue prescription meds would be quite a serious event, especially if it was for quite a long time. What's interesting is that I'm sure all of those meds would actually be stockpiled in the UK. So I'm sure that someone somewhere would come up with a bright idea, and if it was to go on for long term, they'd be able to sort it out and actually get these things distributed to people. But do we want to rely on that? No, not really. Ideally, we want to be prepped for it. Again, grid going down due to a CME. As far as I'm concerned, a CME is a pretty major event, especially if it was a Carrington-style event, which a lot of people have talked about. But that wouldn't affect the whole globe in one go, unless it was, a long, drawn-out event from the sun, where the world obviously turns over 24 hours. If it was more than 2 days, then the whole world's going to be affected. But generally, these things are one big flash. In which case, I'm assuming I'm right. I'm not an expert on this, but if that was to happen, then half the globe would carry on living life perfectly normally, because most countries have their own grid systems. But as an example, I went to a house last night. It was about 8 p.m. and went to deliver some stuff, and he was running around outside with his torch on, and said to me he'd had no power since 5 that morning. Now that's the longest power cut I've never experienced a power cut that long. I don't think since the 70s or 80s. Quite often I'll turn my PC on in the morning and there'll be a different light flashing, and it's usually because there's been a power cut overnight, which might be an hour or so. but certainly not a whole day. Although it was fun for him and the kids, and they were running around with his family and the torches and everything else. Imagine if that extended to a week or 2 weeks. It doesn't have to look like a year grid down. If even a localized power cut for a week could be quite disruptive. So again, this is why I found it so important to have a solar backup. One, just to gain the knowledge, and so now I can put solar anywhere. And two, it's I'll have lighting, I'll have power for quite a lot of appliances around the house in the event of a long-term power down situation. So once you've got all the basics covered, it's basically expanding on that. So once you've got all your supplies there, then it's starting to learn some skills, get some make sure you're mentally and physically fit as best you can. I did a video a while ago where I said I was going on a fitness program. I was a little bit late starting, but I've now got into that. I'm starting to feel the effects. I'm feeling a lot better, a lot stronger already. Just building a bit of muscle. And as I said before, I'm 52, and it's sometimes I wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm about 90. And it's not good. So doing a bit of exercise, it makes you start makes you feel like you can cope with some worst case scenarios a bit better. Talking about skills, there's only so much water you can store. So maybe learn about water filtration. Get some water filtration tablets, purification tablets, some water filter systems in. I've got some pretty basic stuff. I've got a ton of those tablets. They're pretty cheap. You can get them online, and learn how to acquire water from not only the rain but condensation as well. There's plenty of water in the air. It's just a case of extracting. There's plenty of water in the air in the UK anyway. It's just a case of extracting it, learning how to do that, and in a clean way, so it's drinkable. So if you are watching this channel for the first time, my name is Steve. I make videos about prepping and some outdoor stuff. I'm hoping to do some more outdoor stuff this year. What I'm trying to do is cover the basics of prepping and then a few in-depth points as well, every now and again, so you can be prepared for most scenarios and not have to kind of panic and think about which scenario you're going to prepare for. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world at the moment, and it would be easy to get overwhelmed by it all and really not know where to start. So as I was saying earlier, if imagine if you had your local water company had a cyber attack, which as did recently, but it was more about data breach, where customers' details and credit card information, that kind of thing went walkabout. But there was also a problem with I don't know what caused it. I don't think it was a cyber attack. I think it was something else, where our water company was unable to provide running water for a large area of not my particular immediate neighbourhood, but a town near me, where pretty much 2 or 3 towns didn't have running water for well over a week. Now, I've never had that happen to me. I've had no water for a couple of days at most, I think, and that was because there was some work going on next door. It was in the joint, the same stopcock. But going without water for a week, you kind of need to be prepared, really, especially when you hear about people stealing water off people's driveways, when the council comes and delivers water to you. It's all you need. So there's little pockets of events happening, around the UK, around the world, and they seem to be, although they are isolated, quite often they don't last very long, but they are becoming more commonplace and on a larger scale. It does kind of give you the feeling that our infrastructure is, maybe it's, I was going to say our infrastructure is as healthy as it's made out to be. Maybe it's not even made out to be that healthy. But I do get the feeling sometimes that there is going to be a major event coming. There's a lot of things kind of all leading up to some sort of big event. So again, having the basics prepped, have your comms ready, have your water, have your food, have all the things that I've talked about in previous videos, and build up from there. So I've been prepping for many years now and have, as I've said before, a big stack of supplies, meds, food, water, and various ways of purifying water. And I've also, I've watched various YouTube channels over the years, and even a lot of the big scaremongering channels I used to watch. Some of their previous videos are mostly the US and Canadian channels, which I don't really watch anymore, but just because they're kind of newsreaders and fearmongers now. But the previous videos, there's some really great informative stuff on there to give you a good basis in prepping. It did result in me buying quite a lot of gear. But my point is this: my thoughts are that most events, like a coronal mass ejection causing a grid to go down, an EMP causing a grid to go down, a cyber attack, any sort of major attack or incident with some of our infrastructure, whether it's water company, whether it's your electricity, whether it's gas, all of these things, if they're prolonged over a long period of time, it's going to gradually lead to societal unrest, is my opinion. And it is just my opinion, but it just looks like when I've done the research and I've looked at what's happened in other countries around the world when there's been big events, and anything prolonged tends to lead to looting and aggression between people. And that's really what we're preparing for. If you want to hole up and you've got all your preps, you can do that. You don't want to have to venture out in a street where there's people looting and raiding houses and all that sort of stuff. When you're used to people looking after you, well, not people looking after you, but companies or councils doing their jobs, collecting rubbish and all that sort of thing. I mean, look at this. This is a street just down the road from me. This wasn't even on bin day. And imagine if they didn't get their rubbish collected for like 2 or 3 weeks, probably any street would start looking like this. I mean, their street looks like this all the time. But it just made me think, this is coming to a street near you. If the council suddenly, all the workers decided that there's a major grid down situation, we're going to go look after our families. We're not going to show up for work. Or they can't show up for work for whatever reason. It wouldn't take very long. That's when you get, rats and various vermin, you get diseases. And I say this because we know this has happened. This is exactly what happened during Hurricane Katrina. You got a lot of diseases in the water, and people just weren't able to get into those areas for whatever reason. So, let's hope we never have a major event like that in the UK, but we are a very small place, so it wouldn't take much. So again, I'll just reiterate my point. It doesn't really matter what the event is even. It doesn't matter what the cause of the event is. If you've got your basic preps and you've built upon that and you've got enough stuff to last you for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, even a year. At one point, I don't think I have now, but at one point I had enough food for a year for me and my family, and it was a lot of storage, and it took a lot of work and cost us quite a bit of money. But we were in a position then, and we're in a position now where I've got several months worth of food and water and other supplies. So it gives you that confidence when you're seeing all this news and all this stuff saying about the next big event and this is happening and there's all this stuff happening around the world. When you've got the basics put aside, you're not going to panic. You're just going to use your preps. So this is my perspective as a UK prepper, and this is my opinion. So let me know what you think. If you found this interesting and you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe so you can get more content like this in the future. And please check out my other videos where I've gone into sort of more in-depth videos about prepping from a UK perspective. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching and stay prepared.